Are you ready?
Uh, the people say they were born ready. I don't know what that means, but I think I'm ready now. I don't think I was born ready.
You've had a lot of, 74 years?
74 years.
74 years
of trying to get ready.
Yeah, trying to get ready. Welcome back, everybody.
It takes me that long to put on my shirt sometimes. Hi.
Why don't you introduce it today?
Hi. Well, welcome to the Timmy Thom Show. We got a great episode today. We're going to be talking about Israel. What's happening there, why things are going on the way they are, what God has in mind. So, Tim, are you ready to go?
I was born ready.
Some people are just lucky, Some of us have to work at it, some of us are born that way. Okay, well, let's go ahead.
Welcome back to another episode of the Timmy Thom Show. It's good to see you guys today on Friday. Well, today it's going to be all about Israel, and we're going to be covering three questions. What has happened in Israel? Because there's been a lot happening in the past week. The rockets being sent over and all that stuff, the Temple Mount. And then two, why should we support her as believers and as a nation? And then three, what is Israel's future? What's going to happen to her in the future? All those topics are going to be covered right now. And so sit back, relax, click the like button, hit the subscribe. All the links will be down below for you to check out all our social media as well. And without further ado, let's get into this.
I've never had further ado, and it sounds very intriguing. Sometime I'd like to have further ado just to see what it's like.
You want some salt and pepper on that too?
I think so. A well-seasoned further ado sounds like it would be pretty good. But yes.
We were going to do Israel, now we're doing further ado.
Yes. If there's a further ado, is there a nearer ado? I don't know.
Well, Israel. Let me ask you some questions, Grandpa.
Go right ahead, son.
So, there's been a lot happening in Israel, okay? Now, right. Israel is this little bitty country in the Middle East.
Smaller than the state of New Jersey.
And that's pretty small.
It's pretty small.
Yeah. Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, not the civilians, but the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, which is a terrorist organization,
which is in control of the Gaza Strip,
has been sending missiles and rockets over to Israel. They sent about 4,000 rockets over to Israel in about a week.
Right.
Why did they do that? What started all of this? Is it Israel's fault?
How did this come about? Well, I'll tell you what I think is the real cause of this. Way back in 620-something, a guy named Muhammad had some visions. He had epilepsy, but he had visions. And he went to the chief priests in Jerusalem and said, "I'm a prophet of God. I have these visions." The chief Jewish priests examined him and said, "No, you're not a prophet of God." This made Muhammad very angry. And at that point, he developed his own religion, Islam. Islam has hated Jews ever since that time. I believe it's because of the hatred that Muhammad had that he's passed on and is continually passed on. So ever since Israel became a nation by UN charter, and incidentally the Arabs were offered their own nation, which was twice as large as Israel at the time, but they said, no, we don't want it. The only thing that we will want is a complete eradication of the Jews. And that's been the Arab point of view for most Arab nations. And sometimes an Arab nation gets on that point of view. And there have been a couple like Egypt that have sort of backed off that point of view now. But that's been the problem from the beginning.
It's been centuries-long struggle.
It has been centuries long. And it has continued.
Because one side wants to eliminate the other side.
Well, every peace proposal that's come up, including the one that you were telling me about that Donald Trump made to the Palestinians for their own state, every peace proposal, even the ones that include giving them their separate state, they've said no. The only thing we want is a complete destruction of all Jews.
Let me try to sum this up real quick. So you have Hamas, right? The terrorist organization who was funded by the Palestinian state.
And they're labeled terrorists by our own State Department. Yes.
By the Palestinian state. Now, they get their weapons two ways, from the Palestinians, who we give money to, and also from Iran, who we give money to.
Well,
is that correct?
And yes, and we gave $500 million to the Palestinians. $500 million. $500 million
right.
to the Palestinians. They can use that then to buy the rockets from Iran.
We weren't funding them under Trump. Is that correct?
We were not funding them under Trump
Okay,
because they
yeah.
were paying the families of terrorist bombers. If you strap a bomb on yourself and you go kill a busload of children in Israel, your family gets thousands of American dollars supplied by our own country.
And so
Trump said, stop. We're not giving you money until you stop using it for that.
And so now that we're under Biden, he's resumed funding back to the Iranians and the Palestinians so that it'll appease them, correct? Okay. So you have Hamas, who was funded by both Iran and the Palestinian state, who are funded by America. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is Hamas wants to destroy Israel. And so what happened recently on the Temple Mount was that Hamas, it was their holy site, Ramadan, right?
Right.
And they had 70,000 people around the Temple Mount. Hamas set fire to the Temple Mount, blamed it on the Jews, and then began sending missiles and rockets over into Israel. Mm-hmm. And now Israel was trying to defend herself. Now here's what happens, and you can see the graphic on the screen. Hamas sends rockets over to Israel every single day. Use of the Gaza Strip, because President Bush gave them that in 2006. Mm-hmm. Gave the Palestinians the Gaza Strip, and now they use the Gaza Strip to shoot rockets.
Israel,
yeah,
the Gaza Strip, and
but
Israel
we pushed them to do that.
We twisted Israel's arm until they did that, and they cleared out all the Jewish settlers from the Gaza Strip.
And now they use it every day to send rockets over into Israel, right?
Yep.
And then when Israel finally defends herself, all this propaganda comes out and says, "See," because Hamas hides behind civilian bodyguards or civilian shields.
Well, they like to put their missiles in hospitals and schools, because then if Israel tries to retaliate and take out the missiles, they can say, look, they're killing the children, they're killing the women and children.
And so that's the propaganda machine.
Oh, they're very good at that. Yeah, they don't miss a trick.
Now, they sent 4,000 rockets over to Israel, and I think only like 10 of them hit.
Right.
Now, why did only 10 of them hit? What kind of defense system does Israel have around her?
Well, it has what's called the Iron Dome, which is a system of interceptors that intercept the rockets as they're coming in, and it's been tremendously effective.
It's like shooting a bullet at a bullet, right?
It's sort of like that.
They shoot a rocket at the rocket in the air.
Right.
Yeah.
And they explode before they have a chance to get to the ground and explode. In fact, there was an article by, I think, a New York Times writer, a guy who writes independently, but the New York Times carries his articles, who said, in sort of a covert way, he said, you know, if the Iron Dome wasn't so effective and saved so many Jewish lives, the Jews would want to come to the peace table and give the Arabs what they really want. Our representative in the House,
Ilhan Omar?
Yes, Congresswoman Omar said, you want to get rid of anti-Semitism? Get rid of the Jews. There won't be any anti-Semitism. You know what that's like? That's saying, you want to get rid of racism? Get rid of black people. There'll be no racism. That's the logic that somebody in our Congress is using.
She's anti-Semitic.
Just a little bit.
She's evil.
And Congress, the House, voted on whether to sell Israel replacement rockets for their defense system. Every single Democrat voted against it. And no Democrat voted to say, wait a minute, Hamas, you're the cause of this problem. You've got to stop doing what you're doing. No Democrat would vote for that. And
interesting.
And no Democrat voted to replenish, to sell replenishment armaments to Israel.
So they vote that way because they really believe Israel is the oppressor.
Oh my gosh.
Right? This little country that has kicked out, they say they kicked out all these people out of their country and they treat Arabs badly and all that. How are Jews, Arabs, Christians, how are they all treated in Israel? Because I know Israel is not just made up of Jewish citizens, correct? There's also Arabs in it. How are Arabs treated in Israel?
When Israel was given this piece of land by the United Nations, the first thing they said was, anyone who stays, whether you're Arab, Muslim, Christian, Jew, or agnostic, whatever you are, if you want to stay and be a citizen of Israel, you will get every right and privilege that Israeli citizens get. The surrounding Arab countries said to the Arabs who lived in that land, clear out. because we're going to attack. In fact, 5 countries did attack at one time.
Yeah, that was on the day they had their independence, right?
Right after Israel got their independence and became a nation.
May 14th, 1948.
That's it. And they said to the Arabs who lived there, the Muslims who lived there, get out, because when we kill everybody, men, women, and children, we won't have time to sort out who's on our side and who's not. So just get out. And as soon as we kick all the Jews out to the sea, then you can move back in. That was 70-some years ago. Mm-hmm. They said, they couldn't get back in, so they put them in these camps where they've kept them for 70 years. No Arab country took these people in and said, I'm sorry, you lost your places, come and be part of our country. No, they said, stay in these camps. We'll teach your children to hate Jews. We'll teach your grandchildren to hate Jews. We'll teach your great-grandchildren to hate Jews. That's the way the thing has gone.
And if you're an Arab in Israel, you have all the rights as a Jewish citizen. Nothing's off limits to you, is that correct?
Arabs in Israel have every right and privilege Israeli citizens do. They get the equivalent of Social Security, just like any other Jewish person in Israel gets. And, just by the side, Arabs who work in Israel make more money than Arabs that work in any Arab country around, unless you're the oil sheik, of course.
So let me get this straight. If you're an Arab and you want to live in Israel, which is Jewish, mm-hmm. you can have all the rights as anybody else. Yeah. Okay. Now, if you are a Jew and you want to go live in Palestine or anywhere else, what happens to you?
They kill you.
They kill you. Yeah. And so that's kind of, knowing that is kind of hilarious to me, that Israel is this oppressor. And, hurting everybody. And that's the lie that the Democrats and also people here are believing, because they don't understand what's happening. Is that correct?
Well, it's not understanding. It's looking at the facts of history.
Yep.
The facts of history will show you that in every war that occurred, Israel was not the aggressor in that war.
That's correct.
It will show you that, as I said before, every peace proposal that has come along, the Arabs have said, no, mm-hmm. that's not enough. We want this.
This is what Hamas does. I'm Hamas. My grandpa's Israel. Poke. Wait. Poke. Now poke me back. Poke. Did you see what he did? Did you see what he did? Shame on you. That's exactly what Hamas does.
And it's even more insidious than that.
It is.
Under some previous administrations, when we were giving money to Hamas, we gave them money for educational purposes. The money was earmarked, said, we're giving you the money, but we want you to use it for educational purposes. I saw an educational video made for elementary school kids who are 5, 6, 7 years old. In that, quote, children's program, they were teaching the children how to knife Israeli children.
Yeah. And they also use blood and gore and movie effects to make it seem like Israel's doing all this damage. Like the proper term is called Pollywood, like Hollywood, but Palestine Hollywood.
Yep.
And they use makeup and effects to add to the idea that Israel is murdering these people. Here's what happens, though. When Israel finds out, hey, that hospital in Gaza or whatever is being used by Hamas terrorists, Israel goes in first, tells them and says, hey, we're going to blow this up, get all the civilians out. And then they go in and destroy it. What other nation is going to do that? They minimize civilian casualties as much as possible.
ماشي حاضر الزنان بتضرب وبعدين ضرب كيل بعدها ماشي والناس على الارض الفاضيه بقول لك مش الزنان حتضرب اول وبعدين تضربوا البرج ماشي عم هذا لسه ايوه خلص ولا يهمك انا بدي اطلع بس لحظه انا والله عادي الامور قضيه هو بده يسمع هو عارف هو مش عارف انه انت غير جو مالك كله طلع من العماره حتى العمارات اللي جنبنا هي واقفين على اسفلت لا لسه بيطلعوا
There have been many cases where there have been civilian casualties, and Israel has taken them to Israeli hospitals
and they send
and
aid
treated
to
them,
Gaza.
and they send aid
to
for
Gaza.
the people. You know, this the building that had Hamas headquarters, but also had AP media headquarters
Oh, the AP,
in it.
yeah.
They called an hour beforehand and said, guys, we know that Hamas is using this as a headquarters, and they're orchestrating all these terrorist rockets that are coming in.
Yeah.
We're going to come after them, but we're giving you a heads up to clear everybody out of the building, all the civilians out of the building, all the AP people out of the building before we do that. Now, as Tim said, name another country that would have done that.
We did that in World War II before we dropped the bomb.
We did that before we dropped the bombs on Japan, but it's a very rare thing.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that. So that's what's happening in Israel. Okay, it's very insidious. Israel has every right to defend herself, just as if someone came in and was attacking your family, you'd have every right to defend yourself. And if someone shot one rocket into LA, you better believe we would respond with a lot of force. It's so funny that when we get to Israel, Israel has to back off, and you don't. It's just so illogical.
You know, and I want to make one thing that appears to me to be the case. Israel has been censured in 1 year, has been censured more times
by the UN?
By the UN for human rights violations than all the other countries in the world combined. Iran, North Korea, China, Pakistan, Afghanistan, African nations. Israel has been cited for more civil rights violations.
Yeah.
When the truth is, there are no violations there.
No.
Women, for example, own more property and control more businesses and high-tech and really specialized businesses in Israel than any other country. And the fact that the Arabs make more money in Israel than they make in any other Arab country.
Exactly.
They have, Israel is one of the few nations in the world where people owe them more money than they owe. It'd be nice if America were like that, but we're trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars away from that. But my sense is Satan, the devil,
deception,
has always hated Israel.
Yep. You look at Pharaoh in Exodus when he tried to slaughter all the boys and get rid of the Jews. You look at Hitler.
You look at Herod.
You look at the story of Esther with Mordecai and Haman, how he wanted to get rid of all the Jews.
Before Christ, Satan said, if I can get rid of the Jews, Christ can't come. He can't come and give salvation to people. After Christ came, he said, I'm mad, and I don't want God doing anything else with those Jewish people who he loves.
Yep.
And I know he loves them, so I'm going to do everything in my power to destroy them. Mm-hmm. And that means I'm going to use every influence I can on every world leader and every country and every people group to get them to hate the Jews and do terrible things to them.
It's really satanically inspired.
It's satanically inspired. And the really scary part is Satan can inspire all he wants, but for countries like ours now to go along with it is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to think that we don't understand better, that we can't see better. But, it says when it comes to Scripture and what God's doing, none are so blind as the one who will not see.
And so that's what's happening spiritually, physically in the world with Israel. Mm-hmm. Now, President Trump, why should we support Israel? Check this out. This is pretty cool. So President Trump harbored 4 peace deals with Arab countries.
Yeah.
And he kind of turned the tide against the Palestinian authorities and Hamas. And he also moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, recognizing that Jerusalem is the eternal capital of the Jews.
Right.
And it belongs to Israel. Right? Now, in Scripture, God tells Abraham in Genesis 12, and he says, those who bless you, I will bless, and those who curse you, I will curse. And that promise is not only for Abraham, but also for all his descendants, to Jews today.
Well, because just before that, God said,
exactly,
you're going to be the father of many nations, and to you and all your descendants.
And he also gives the land specifications of Israel. Why is it so important for Christians and America to support Israel?
This is not an original idea with me. I heard somebody else say this, but it made sense to me. He said, President Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, saying it is the real capital of Israel.
Yep.
That lifts Israel up. He brokered these 4 peace deals with these Arab Muslim nations who made an actual treaty and a diplomatic liaison with Israel. They have diplomatic exchanges now with Israel. If what God told Abraham, I will bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. Under Trump's administration, we had the lowest unemployment in 60 years. More blacks, more women, more young people, more Asians had jobs than ever before.
The economy was great.
The economy was great.
Gas
the gas prices
were
we were no longer dependent on foreign oil.
We were energy independent.
The median income increased. The economy was going wonderfully. Is that one of the blessings that God gives because President Trump blessed Israel?
I would say so. All this is because, one, we have people that don't fear God. They don't fear Israel. They don't abide by his laws, and this is what happens.
Well, that's true.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so as a believer, we're supposed to spur the Jew on to jealousy, as Paul says. Because as believers, if you know about the New Testament scriptures and say Jesus is the Messiah, and you show them how, and you show them how much you love the Lord, which is supposed to be their Lord, it's supposed to spur them on the jealousy and say, hey, that's my blessing. I want that. And when we say support Israel, we're not saying we support everything she does, policy-wise, such as vaccine passports.
Yeah.
I don't support that at all. I think
Neither
it's a
do I.
terrible idea. However, when it comes to supporting Israel in the truth and saying this is what's really happening, we're going to support her, we're going to help her make the best decisions, and we're going to support the people also.
And we're going to try to prevent others from destroying them.
Exactly. God blesses those people. God blesses you when that happens, and when you pray for the peace of Jerusalem, as Psalm 122 says. Israel's future. Here's the thing you have to understand. Israel's not going anywhere. Israel's there to stay, guys, forever. And if our nation, if other nations want to be around, they will have to support Israel, because God's not going to allow those eventually who don't support her and try to destroy her. He will actually end up destroying them in the process. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. The day is coming.
Yep.
The day is coming. And there's a couple of great things that are going to happen. One of them, when Jesus comes back, he's going to judge. The first time he came as the Savior, he came to save all who would respond to him. But the Scripture says when he comes back the next time, and they promised he is coming back, he's coming back as the judge.
Yep.
And when he does, he's going to separate the nations, those who blessed his brethren and those who cursed his brethren.
Matthew 25.
You can read it in Matthew chapter 25, the sheep and the goats. And he's going to destroy.
Yeah.
He's going to destroy them there. And then what's even worse is, not only do you get destroyed in this life, Jesus also said this, and you'll have to help me remember where it is.
You'll be cast out into the darkness where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Yes,
And where
because
the
he
fire is
said,
not quenched.
and the fire is not quenched.
Yep.
At the final judgment, all those who did not respond to Jesus, their name is not in the book of life. They are sent to the fire.
Yep.
And Jesus said this, don't fear the one that can kill the body. Fear him who can destroy both the body and the soul in hell.
Yep.
That's a God that loves us so much, he sent his son to die for us. But he's also a God who does not let justice be put aside. God himself has said, man is doing terrible things, but I'm not lashing out at man. But the day is going to come when the fullness of the evil of man has built up far enough. And at that point, I'm cutting it off.
There's 2 questions to consider. One, if you support Israel, know scripturally why you support her. And then 2, if you don't support her, if you believe everything's Israel's fault, you need to ask yourself 2 things. One, what facts support that? And you need to do some research. The facts are there. Our Instagram page has a highlight on it called Israel, and we cover all this in that. Check it out when you get a chance. The link will be below. And then 2, if after you've looked at the facts and you still have a hatred for Israel, you need to check your heart. And you say, why is that? Is Jesus really my Lord? Because it seems that when you come to Christ, he puts an instant love for the Jewish people inside of you.
He does.
Because they're God's people, and now that we as believers are grafted in, as Paul says in Romans 11, to the original branch, we want them to be saved.
And he also goes on to say that Israel is going to be regrafted in.
Yeah.
In fact,
And that they will be saved.
when Jesus comes to earth, he's going to rule and reign on the earth. He's going to be in Israel.
Yep.
And Israel is going to be, at that time, during the kingdom age
The
that's coming.
center of the world.
The center of the world. In fact, is it Jeremiah or Zechariah where it says a man, 10 guys will grab onto the coattail
Zechariah, I
of
think.
Zechariah. 10 guys will grab onto the coattail of a Jew because they'll say to him, because you live where God lives.
Yep.
I want to go there and find out about that.
Yep.
So Israel's future is she's going to be the number one nation in the world. Why?
Because God said so.
God chose Israel. And he said to Israel at the beginning, he said, I didn't choose you because you're the smartest or the kindest or the most spiritual or the wisest or the bravest or the biggest or any of that.
Yep.
I chose you because
I wanted to.
it pleased me to choose you.
Yep.
It's not because Israel did something that was extra special, different than anybody else.
And he chooses you the same way.
He does.
And we have to respond to him. I think we'll wrap up
I think
this
we should.
episode.
Thank you for being patient with us.
Yes.
God bless you. I hope this has been encouraging to you or stimulating to you.
Yeah. If we can get you to critically think about these things, question everything. Question everything. Do your own research.
You know, Reagan said it really well. He said, trust, but verify.
Yep.
Trust, but verify.
Good old Reagan.
Yeah.
All right, folks. With that, we will see you later and see you next week.
God bless you.
See you.
Welcome back. This is episode today, and be sure if you like us to hit the like button down below. And
Here, do this.
yes,
Say, hey, welcome back to the Timmy Thom
oh,
Show.
that's right. I told
We have a
you.
great episode in store for you today. We're going to be talking all about Israel, what has happened, and why we should support her.
Yeah.
And ask me if I'm ready, and I say I'm ready, and then you
Okay.
say, here we go.
Okay, that sounds like a
Go ahead. Do you want to do the plug this time?
Oh no, I don't remember it well
Okay.
enough.
Yeah.
Look at my shirt. It's stuck to the back of the chair.
Oh, isn't that nice?
I can't move.
It is stuck.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's why I know I was sitting up straight.
Yeah.
My shirt would not allow me.